It is a pleasure to meet you at this opportunity to mention very important brief related to previous message, economic structure and growth. Today, World Economic Forum annual meeting starts, and it does host quality of guests in Davos, Switzerland. It is an opportunity to mention comments came from two well-known scholars, Dr. Kishore Mahbubani, well known to 2012 World Economic Forum. He hosted a number of interviews with well-known guests in 2012 World Economic Forum, and he based on a number of things, he expected to United States to get third place after two countries. That's based on a specific reading concluded his or led to his conclusion, which is available on the latest edition. Another well-known scholar, Dr. Kishore Mahbubani, served UN ambassador, Singapore UN ambassador for several years, well-known diplomat and academia. The other well-known name in economics science, Dr. Paul Krugman, a Nobel Prize winners in economic science 2008. His comments on London School of Economics about the features of depression, economic depression. Just to let you know that it's too hard in science of economics. It's not easy to convince well-known figures in field of economics and finance and philosophy, and after that to convince politicians. It's not an easy, but I'll give it a try in very simple words. I have a totally different opinion, as you heard my previous message. U.S. economy is much bigger than anybody can imagine, and not discovered yet. Just to mention the financial network and the financial tools of the economy, very limited, and it does not, it speaks a very limited range. And only 2% of the total financial tools available at this moment, which led to United States gross domestic product 15.6. If the rest of the 98% of the total financial tools becomes available, just imagine how much the gross domestic product of the United States would be. List of solutions, it brings much of growth, as I mentioned in previous message. But let me just, with number of things on a list of solutions, it does bring the economic structure enhancement to maintain economy macroeconomics structure, to increase growth on economy macroeconomics structure, and it does lead to growth on gross domestic product. From there, it gets back with incentives to increase more, to add more growth, with taxes cuts, industrial development, innovation, much of other things to encourage for more growth towards the economy structure. And it gets back from economy structure to gross domestic product, and from gross domestic product to economy structure. These two parts, which contains more other derivatives, economy, macroeconomics, financial structure, and economy, microeconomics, financial structure. If it is not available, then any geographical area becomes they face a number of limitations, and it doesn't reflect at the final results. In other words, United States economy subject to huge growth. And my comment to Dr. Kishore Mahbubani, just Los Angeles, entitled to receive, and that is an obligation. I made it to myself, and I have it in details. I wrote a letter. I traveled through too many cities in the United States, more than 44 states, and hundreds of cities. I visited the mayor office, and I delivered a letter, has brief. It says City of Los Angeles entitled to receive between $2 trillion to $12 trillion, $6 trillion on average. That's just in Los Angeles. And the state of California has 482 municipalities between cities and towns, which means U.S. economy has huge growth range. If it's only 2% of the total financial tools works, what about just 60% more? It will be huge growth. The gross domestic product will be multiplied. And there is a list of solutions. Each solutions create much of growth. Total clearance for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac debt, $8 trillion, which relates to the financial services. That's another part of the solution. But the economy structure itself of the U.S. economy has a number of areas entitled to much of enhancement and growth. Part of it immediate growth, and I mentioned several times the U.S. economy and financial industry. U.S. economy entitled to receive $26 trillion growth in 24 hours, just the financial industry. The U.S. economy has more than 226 main and derivative industries. I think it does convince Dr. Kishore Mahbubani and Dr. Paul Krugman from their pessimism on U.S. economy. Just an additional effort from the financial authorities, the federal government, and the Congress-related committees, and much of growth does take places in hours and fewer days. And I can refer to the industrial development it leads to, which means trade transformation. It leads to not less than $200 trillion growth. Economies of the cities, it leads to not less than $200 trillion growth on commodities markets and financial markets of those cities through the entire states. That's bring more than $400 trillion in a very limited period of time. It does include immediate growth, $26 trillion, and those another 200 and 200 in 2 months, maximum 2 months period. Letters addressed to the financial authorities, Federal Reserve, Treasury Department, and the Congress-related committees. And I have a very important point here. These days, World Economic Forum takes place these days. There is a very important note concern the Federal Reserve districts and their interest rates. Borrowing an increase on debt ceilings, which led to drop from 3As to 2As plus because of the finance of the debt. The interest rates or the federal funds rate, when it gets to least levels, it does increase the cost of foreign borrowing, and it does lower the cost of domestic borrowing. Not quite sure how the Federal Reserve districts manage the situation. They work in a very limited financial tools, and what is happening, they reflect on the investment position on negative direction. When you increase, when you keep borrowing, the borrowing, it does increase the cost of foreign borrowing, and it does lower the cost of domestic borrowing. It does increase the entire cycle of the borrowing forward with more costs, which reflects on the investment position. I'm not getting to too much details, but if you remember the resources allocation, resources management, financial management, and investment management is supposed to lead to much of growth. Starts on resources allocation. But on what concerns federal funds rates, when it gets to least level, that means the spending needs to be directed with more cautious. And I think the financial authorities, they agree on what I'm talking about, because spending is not on the Federal Reserve, but they have the part of finance which is part of the 2% of the total financial tools, but it needs to more additional focus and attention. And I think I prepared myself for a direct talk on those list of solutions, and it does bring much of other financial tools to increase too many directions for the growth. And it does give a break for the federal funds rates just to remain on the investment direction, and not just spending, which it could take the spending forward to areas does not give a return back, and thus it keeps adding to the debt. And it is an opportunity to mention the national debt. United States, 2012, the similar period of time when the World Economic Forum took place, it was $14.6 trillion. Today, it is almost 16.5, which means about $2 trillion debt increase. I hope as fast as possible to get the start on the list of solutions, to get the start with the $26 trillion, and I'm quite sure the authorities won't hesitate a moment to start on those solutions, and it does systematize a number of directions of growth, and it keeps growing. And just to convince the Dr. Kishore Mahbubani and Dr. Paul Krugman, United States economy much bigger than they can imagine. More than 226 main and derivative industries. Just the financial industry entitled to receive $26 trillion in 24 hours. Not a third place. With my full respect to Dr. Kishore Mahbubani, and with my full respect to Dr. Paul Krugman, the pessimism would concern the depression, it gets clear in hours. And I think Dr. Paul Krugman understand when I talk about macroeconomics, macroeconomics, and how it does increase economy microeconomics towards growth on gross domestic product, and from there it gets back with more incentives to increase the growth with tax cuts, and gets back to the economy structure, and between economy structure and gross domestic product, much of growth to be kept growing forward. I hope, in brief, I made convince Dr. Kishore Mahbubani and Dr. Paul Krugman, which means the politicians will be convinced when they hear these brief talks, and I hope the Financial Authority, Federal Reserve Districts, and Treasury Department, federal government, and the financial authorities in Congress, Senate, and House of Representatives, they come ready to start on those solutions. To my knowledge, a number of the federal contractors on consulting, they are attending the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. With my full respect, consulting, it does take from taxpayers' money. Solutions, a list of solutions you want, it won't take not even a cent from taxpayers' money. It does add, and it does add to taxpayers' money, much of growth, with much of new investment schemes or investment funds to be allocated to many areas, which gives much of growth to existing investment funds, without name each of those, but much of growth expected anytime, any moment, as soon as the financial authorities, their owner, to respond and become ready to talk. My two visits to Congress and my visit to Los Angeles, through the city of Los Angeles or state of California, and to their honor, the President of the United States and the National Council of Economics and the Congress. Thank you very much, and I hope this brief message convinced much of the audiences who are supposed to watch the video, and with much of good expectations. Happy New Year.